Hi, I'm Jack. 2 years ago, I thought I might never skate again. It might sound a bit dramatic, but there is a reason. I had slipped out doing a hip transfer and fell quite a height and tore everything that held this elbow together. On top of that, my wife was expecting our second child 3 weeks later. So I was facing into that with one arm and a pretty embarrassed phone call from the skate park saying I was going to a hospital. It felt like it was time to quit. I needed my arm, right? I had to look after this kid, I had to look after our other kid, and so I dedicated myself 100% to that rehab process. I was in a pretty good place to do this. I had about a decade's experience as a track and field athlete. I was a long jumper and a sprinter. I had done countless drills, plyometrics, Olympic lifting, circuit training, all of it. So I knew how to push myself. I knew how to push into discomfort and progress without hurting myself. It worked really well. I remember going to a physio appointment. He said this was the best recovery for that time they had ever seen after this type of elbow surgery. They couldn't believe how quickly and how well healed my arm was. So I got my arm back to as close to 100% as it'll ever be. I did it very quickly and it was incredibly satisfying. So much so though that I think I got a bit addicted to that progress. I was in the gym 4 days a week. I was doing an hour or more at a time. I was training hard, right? But without a kind of a goal, just training in the gym for the gym's sake. And then I gave myself a target of a local triathlon to do. It's a fun event. I've done it a couple of times before. There's a great charity involved in it, so it feels like worthwhile to do. Some of my neighbors were signed up to do it too, so I thought it might be a nice social outlet. But the reality of my pretty busy schedule is that I spent a lot of time training by myself. I was seeing messages come in from the skate crew. They were ripping it up in the rare summer weather here. Meanwhile, I was in the gym, in the squat rack, in the pool, alone. And even that triathlon I kind of did around my gym sessions. I needed to audit my time and my activities and focus on what was actually bringing me joy. My family were obviously the number one. And as I thought more and more about what I actually wanted and where I could get it, I realized that skating could give me multiple things all at once. It gave me community, it gave me challenge, and it gave me creativity, all at the same time. And that prompted me to think of skateboarding as my sport. And that realization changed everything. Now my training had a purpose. And that purpose wasn't just performance. Listen, I want to be able to just rock up the park whenever people are going. When the stars align and I'm free and the weather's good, I want to be able to go and just skate and not worry about it. But I also want to make sure that I come home in one piece, that I can be the dad, that I can be the husband that I want to be. If I roll my ankle or if I slip a disc, that puts me out of action for weeks at a time. It doesn't let me throw my kids around like I want to. It doesn't let me help out around the house as much as I need to. So it doesn't just affect me anymore. So I needed a system that would respect my time and build the resilience that I need to go and skate and to enjoy the great things about skateboarding without worrying about a bad knee or a tweaked back. Now I was training for durability on the board. And this took me back to my days as a track athlete. That's when we built the base of our fitness, and we'd use that as a platform to launch from later in the year. And when I distilled down what I need as that base for skateboarding, it came down to 3 pillars. It's armor, flexibility, and pop. So let's talk about the concept of armor first. This concept comes from the legendary track and field coach and kettlebell OG, Dan John. Dan is a former international discus thrower and has written incredible strength and conditioning programs for track and field athletes, but also for collision sports athletes like American football or rugby players. And now I'm starting to think of skateboarding as a collision sport. We don't often think about it that way, but we all fall, right? If we're trying new tricks, if we're trying tricks on new obstacles, we're gonna fall. We're gonna fall, right? And we're gonna hit the ground in different ways. We're gonna take unexpected twists and bumps, and all of that is what collision athletes train for. So Dan has a go-to program for those types of athletes. It's called the Armor Building Formula, and it's not about hours and hours and hours in the gym. It's 15 to 30 minute sessions that I can do in here that I can do in my living room, in the garden. I can fit them in around my schedule. I can fit them in after I drop the kids to creche, before I go to work. I can squeeze them in at lunchtime. I can do them after the kids are gone to bed. The odd time, if the kids are watching TV, I'll do them in the sitting room with them. I got them a tiny little kettlebell so that they don't try and steal my ones. But look, and the signature workout in this program is called the Armor Building Complex. A complex is basically a series of exercises that you do in one go without putting down your implement. So in this case, we take 2 kettlebells, we pick them up, we do 2 kettlebell cleans, 1 overhead press, and 3 front squats, and then we put the bells down. It does nearly everything you'd need. It trains the squat movement, it trains the hinge movement. These are both vital for jumping, for pumping, for landing more importantly. It trains the sort of cushion muscles in the upper back and shoulders that take the impact when we roll or when we get a bump to the side. Probably most importantly, it trains that core bracing, that structural integrity that keeps us upright through sketchy landings and through bails in different directions. So I do these at the top of the minute. I do a round, it takes me maybe 15-20 seconds, rest for the rest of that minute, go again. Right now I'm up to about 15 minutes in a session. I'm building my way up to 30. But I started at 5. There are also versions of this that use 1 kettlebell. If you only have 1, you can do it with dumbbells if you have a gym. Next up then is pop. And by pop, what I'm talking about is plyometric exercises. So plyometrics are essentially bouncing exercises where we're training that elasticity, particularly of our feet and lower legs. I've done these for a long time, okay? I lived on these as a long jumps athlete. Then later, as I moved on from track and field and I took up endurance sports like half marathons, like the triathlons I mentioned, I always kept plyos going as something that I like to do, but also something that keeps me bouncy in those activities. But a word of warning, they're pretty heavy on the legs, especially if you're new to them. You do need to be careful not to progress these too quickly or to overtrain them. But to start off, it's like skipping rope. You can do these pogo pops, a set of 10, 2 sets of 10, do it a couple of times a week. After that, add another set, maybe add another set after another 2 weeks. As you get used to them, then you can progress to slightly more complex movements in different directions or with a bit more height. Later on to single leg exercises. Ones that I like to progress through from basic pogo pops are then compass hops, where we're going in different directions. That's great for skating. After that, then we can move on to something like skipping. I really like these left, left, right, right, where it's training each leg to stabilize independently. Again, really important for those unexpected landings or hard steps. And then if you wanted to train for something like bigger drops or you need to develop some more force, you could look at progressing to something like bounding. In addition to plyos, I would also be thinking about squat jumps or box jumps. I see a lot of people when they're learning to ollie, particularly older skaters, and they don't ever jump in their life, you know? And if you can't jump high, you can't ollie high. And it's 2 things. It's the force of production, how fast and hard you can push against the floor to move your body up. And then the second part is it's getting your knees up and getting your legs tucked up underneath you, okay? So squat jumps are perfect for this. Again, you don't need to go crazy when you're starting out, like a set of 6 after you do those plyos if you're gonna do them, or in your warm up when you're getting ready to skate. But a few jumps, a few times a week is just gonna get your body used to and comfortable with generating the forces you need to get some height. Lastly then is mobility. And there's patterns that I like to train in mobility for skateboarding. One is the squat, and I like to do the goblet squat. Look, squatting is obviously a movement that we get into a lot on a skateboard for any sort of a flat ground trick, for gaps, anything like that, for taking off, but especially for landing. And if our hips aren't loose and open, then our lower back takes up that slack, right? And I don't know how many dads I've seen that put their back out after they have kids. Those injuries are so hard to do anything from. They're so hard to recover from too. I don't want that. So I want to keep my hips nice and open so that my lower back can do its job of stabilizing that lower trunk, right? And not having to move and compensate for the hips. Speaking of the hips, hip internal rotation is something I also like to train for skating. I like to do these hip transitions. I do these in the little mental health room that we have in work. I like to do these squats with an internal rotation on each side. Think about how many times you have done a trick you've done a gap and your back foot slips off the board, that could be a recipe for an ACL injury. I don't want that. The more free and open your hips are, the more you can move into those positions, the less likely it is to injure your knee or your hip, and the less likely it is to take you to the ground where you might injure something else. And then I like to think about the mid and upper back, which does like to turn, unlike the lower back. So many tricks ask us to have a nice kind of separation of our hips and our shoulders. Think about things like 180s or any sort of spun tricks like that, reverts, grinds where you're going backwards, like say a front board or a front nose. And you know who has this cracked? Golfers. They've got so many drills, so many exercises to try and get that nice spine rotation. I like to do these lunges with rotations. I like to do these windmills. And then one last bonus that I'd like to mention around the back and the spine is from a rehab physio here in Ireland called David Gray. I've done a couple of his programs in the past for injuries. One of them was a follow-on program that I used for my elbow injury. He talks a lot about the importance of how our shoulder blades move over our rib cage and how that affects the freedom of motion in our upper back. I really like dead hangs for this. It keeps my shoulders feeling good and it keeps the kind of shoulder blades moving and mobile on the rib cage, which I think helps with freeing up my back. I'm a bit stiff in the mid back, so I do really try and work on these daily when I can. The other thing that David mentions around keeping the upper back and shoulders happy is just walking. I like to get my 10,000 steps a day, and a big reason for that is because it helps to keep my shoulders and my back in good shape, as well as keeping a good level of cardio fitness I'm feeling when I'm trying to learn flat ground tricks these days. So look, I find these days I need like at least 45 minutes to an hour to make good use of a skate session. I don't always have that time. I do pretty much always have 15 minutes in a day where I can do something, and that's where that athlete mindset comes in. I find if I have these exercises that I can do in those 15 minutes, it keeps me engaged with skating and it keeps me doing something to make progress. And in strength training, look, consistency is everything. This isn't about going crazy. It's about starting where you are, doing as much as you can manage within your life and your circumstances, and then trying to nudge that up a little bit. So next month you do a little bit more than you did this month. And I know from my track and field background and for training for these other endurance sports that if I can be consistent with these three pillars through the winter and into spring, I know that come the end of spring into summer when the weather's better and I'm out skating, that I will have that really good base that I can go out, chase those dream tricks without worrying about coming home with a tweaked back or an achy knee. I can just go and skate. But look, accidents do happen, and we're going to talk about safety techniques and falling in my next video. So hit subscribe if you'd like to see that. But for now, let's get padded up and get better for longer. So on.